Can't 100% put my finger on why, but I think the Jets just might want to win the cup.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously, we have some big stuff to talk about after Winnipeg's very impressive game against the Dallas Stars. We all knew that the Jets needed to have a really big performance, and oh boy, did they absolutely 100% deliver. Before we dive into the specifics, though, did want to let you know about our friends and partners at FanDuel. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Stay tuned to hear more about how FanDuel can help you win bigger and better than ever during March Madness. Now, like I said, the Jets just wrapped up their game against Dallas. What a performance against the Stars. And I know that Dallas was missing Heiskanen and Hintz, which is obviously, it is a big loss, but in this case, you know, the Jets have gone through similar situations, but it's really an outcomes-based league, right? You still got to take care of business. You still got to go in and beat up the teams that you're supposed to. And there was no sure thing in this game. The Jets could have come in looking flat. Winnipeg's top line recently has struggled a lot. The depth scoring has kind of been a little hit or miss. The power play has started to look more normal, but you never know, right? And with all of those doubts in mind, the Jets basically said, you know what? Let's just whoop the Stars a new one. And they absolutely did. The Jets' top line showed up in one of the most impressive games they've ever played, and they did it against a really good opponent. And I think the way that Arniel tried to make sure that he matched up his lines against favorable 1v1s in terms of the matchups for his combos really showed some good tactical acumen and flexibility. And, the lineup, especially on the defensive side of things, with both Stanley and Pionk sidelined, I think this Jets squad did a really good job of answering a lot of the concerns. Obviously, it's not, Colorado or Vegas, but beating up on Dallas, the team that's directly chasing you in the standings, where there's now a 10-point margin, that is a tremendous steal. And the Jets basically just stamped their ticket towards, in my opinion, winning the West and the Central. I know it's technically, still a bit of a ways to go. I think the magic number for clinching the West is like 25 points, or maybe that might just apply to the Central, but it's basically going to apply to the West too, because Vegas is probably not going to be able to close that distance. But for the Jets, this is a tremendous victory. And, basically from start to finish, Winnipeg really showed up and showed out. Offensively, they created a ton of really dangerous chances in the slot. Defensively, they kept Dallas to the perimeter. And I know you'll see that the shot clock looks a little more favorable to Dallas. In terms of the actual danger of those chances, that's where you really notice a stark difference. Winnipeg, from top to bottom, was just better. The Stars looked sluggish. They really couldn't generate a lot that was particularly dangerous until the second half of the game. And even then, Winnipeg was really, from start to finish, just the better team. This was a game in which the Jets took all of their concerns that they've been hearing and silenced a lot of us critics. This was a great game. I think what, really impressed me was that there were really no weak links at all. No one really struggled. And even some of the players who may not have had a traditionally bigger role in a win like this showed up and did their best. Tanev, I thought had a really solid game on the fourth line. He actually got himself his first point since his return to Winnipeg, so good to see for him. Luke Schenn, I thought, did a really solid job next to Sandberg, and I know that the fancy stats for him are going to be a little bit on the rougher side, but I think the biggest thing for Schenn is basically just playing a clean game. He'll throw a couple of big hits, he'll make some passes, but he avoided anything that we're usually used to where you have a chaotic play, right? Both Pionk and Stanley are often the kinds of guys who will make some really risky plays or bad passes, and it gets picked off and creates a chance for the opponent. This time, Shen just kind of kept it clean. And because you have Sandberg as your partner, he can lean on him very heavily and let, Dylan do a lot of the puck carrying on top of the forwards who were already covering really well. There were some defensive moments where maybe the forwards or the blue line had a couple of issues. Maybe they made a mistake here and there, but that's going to happen in any game. I think the net was so good that you just don't really care too much. Again, this was a performance where I think the Jets really made a statement win. I think, for Winnipeg, this was the kind of game that Winnipeg is kind of needed in a broader sense. I'm not going to sit here and say that the Jets have been bad recently, but they've been perhaps not quite up to standard. They've had some sloppy wins. The top line has struggled to really have a sizable impact. And so with all of that in mind, this was a big opportunity for the team to say, this is why we're the number one seed in the league and why you should have faith in us in the playoffs. And the Jets 100% answered. They came up, they showed out, they put on a great show, and the fans in attendance very clearly appreciated it. Canada Life Center was rocking. A 4-1 victory. A little sad that Helly didn't get his 7th shutout. It would have been a career high. Hopefully he can get it towards the end of the season here. Over the next couple of weeks, he deserves another shutout. Also, just so you know, he only surrendered 1 goal again. The guy is an absolute madman. I tell you, Hellebuck, if he does what he's doing right now in the postseason, you are going to have a very hard time getting past this team in the postseason. And, I say that even for teams like Colorado. Hellebuck last year had a really bad team in front of him. This team is going to have more pace and more speed and hopefully a better structure than they did last season. And for Helly, that can only mean good things because it seems like his Vezina form continues to hold. So very impressive year for Connor Hellebuck. What a performance again from the team in front of him. Just a really good vibes win and a very complete victory against an opponent that the Jets basically only had 1 power play against. And the power play, mind you, came at the very last minute and a half of regulation. So the Jets did all of this at 5v5. I think that's what really stands out. And, it's what I've talked about as being perhaps my only real concern with this team is what happens when you only have even strength to go off of. It's been an issue at times where the Jets couldn't create as much. This time, though, they absolutely said, you know what, 5v5 or on the power play, we can do it all. And the Jets didn't have to lean on special teams at all. The penalty kill was also looking pretty decent. And I think that there's a bit of a common thread there with the penalty kill and this Jets blue line suddenly looking more stable that you probably don't need me to tell you. You know what it is. And I don't really want to name drop because I've already talked about this poor guy enough. And I don't blame him specifically. I think we all know that he was just being asked to do too much. And so for that reason, we'll cut him some slack in this one. But man, what a big step towards clinching the division in West. A big statement game for the Jets. And the top line, I really feel, deserves some roses for this one. This was a really complete performance from them. Want to chat a little bit about their performance specifically and what I hope it means for the playoffs, because I do think that this is really the next step for them, right? They've maybe taken a while to get up to speed, and there's no guarantee that what we saw tonight continues. But if it does, I think that makes you feel a lot better about their potential playoff matchups. So we'll chat about that in just a little bit. But before we go too much further, did want to let you know about our friends and partners at Trade Coffee. If you're like me, your mornings have to start with a good cuppa. But I got tired of the usual grocery store crap. We all know that, let's be honest, right? Some of those coffee grounds aren't high quality. The beans aren't that flavorful. You need something that can help you elevate your coffee to the next level. And that's why I turned to Trade. Trade is the #1 specialty coffee marketplace in the U.S., bringing you fresh coffee from over 50 of the country's top roasters. Their experts have taste tested thousands of brews, curating over 450 amazing roasts. Whether you're new to coffee or know exactly what you like, they'll handpick the perfect match just for you. They help you take a quick quiz, which only takes you a minute, and they match you with a roast that actually fits your flavor profile. And, of course, the subscription is super easy. There's no more last-minute grocery store runs or settling for whatever's on the shelf when you are running low. And if you don't like your first bag, no worries. Trade will replace it for free until they get it just right. Right now, Trade is exclusively offering our listeners 40% off your first order at drinktrade.com/LockedOnNHL. That's drinktrade.com trade.com/LockedOnNHL for 40% off your first order. drinktrade.com/LockedOnNHL. Get brewing today. While we're here, also did want to let you know again about our friends and partners at FanDuel and follow up on what I mentioned earlier. Obviously, March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the biggest chance ever to get in on the action like never before. New customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. Obviously, Maryland for me is perhaps not a big tournament name right now. So, my college basketball interest has sort of been off and on, but we all know that teams like Gonzaga and Kentucky and some of these other powerhouses have traditionally had deeper runs, but maybe you feel like this is going to be a year of an upset. Well, no matter who you're rooting for, whether it's a favorite or an underdog, FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. And if you want to win even bigger, be sure to make same game parlays to multiply your victory. And of course, the FanDuel app is super safe, secure, and easy to use. Very easy, super convenient. And if you want to get on the action right now, be sure to do so at FanDuel.com. You can get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are just following up on some big stuff from Winnipeg's statement game against the Dallas Stars. We have needed a complete top to bottom 5v5 win from the Jets against a real playoff contender, a team that is truly good. And while the Dallas Stars may have been a little beat up, and when I say a little bit, I mean a lot in some ways, because Heiskanen and Hintz being out definitely takes out a lot of their processing power and speed on the back and front end. But even with that, I still think it's important to celebrate the merits of this victory. It was a smashing win. And I was especially impressed by the top line, who I thought really came out with a game that tells you they're ready for the playoffs. I know that we do still have our concerns about how they might match up against a Colorado or a Vegas, but against Dallas, they were pretty much spotless. Sure, they may give up a couple of decent, defensive opportunities to the opponent, but it's how they respond, I think, in games like this where it really speaks about the improvement this year compared to last. Kyle Connor has been a little bit snake-bitten recently and had some really bad passes in some of his previous games. He just didn't really look at the races. Tonight, he scored 2 goals, and one of them was an absolute peach of a goal. Fantastic finish. Ottinger never really had a chance. His second finish was also very good. I guess you can technically say it wasn't as impressive, which is just really more by his own standards because he's such a clinical player. But really, I came away impressed with Velarde doing great work on the forecheck. Scheifele was active and engaged in creating the whole way through. And for the most part, when there were defensive shifts that came out, I thought that they did try to hustle back and cover for the defenders too. So generally speaking, just a ton of good stuff. They took advantage of a Stars blue line that I think was definitely laboring without Heiskanen. And so this was just a great, strong game. But what I'm hoping it builds on for the future is a top line that can continually show up at even strength. We know that that's kind of been in and out this season. It's been much better than last year. But for this season, even still compared to other top lines, they haven't always been able to put it together. If they are finally ready to start doing it, even though it's late, I think that it's never been a better time than right now. This is a fantastic opportunity for them to put 2 and 2 together, especially as they're heading into the playoffs. This is their chance to really solidify their role. And if Arniel is smart about this, I think he can give them maybe some easier matchups in between so that they can take advantage of those skill mismatches. The top line has loads of skill. It's never been a question of that. It's just how they maybe match up against other top lines, right? Those teams that can do the McKinnon and McDavid stuff, the Dreisaitl's, even the Eichels and Barkovs, those matchups can be tough for that line. But in this game, they showed that they can, generally be trusted with a ton, and I think that was really impressive. I just hope it really continues in the postseason. When you start seeing some of those same opponents for, 4, 5, 6 games and beyond, that's where things start to get really challenging. But hopefully that's not the case this playoff run. And I will say that compared to last year, because Kyle Connor has been so good in multiple facets and has really stepped up, I'm less worried about them than I was last year. And if they struggle, what's really great is that the Lowry line, sometimes the Domestikov line, these groups can come in, help give them some rest, help them recalibrate, and give the Jets some real flexibility. Nice to see that, some of the chaos has maybe been starting to creep out of these games, and that the Jets have been controlling more and more of the play like they did tonight. I guess the only real question that remains is when you start facing really fast teams, those squads that have really haunted the Jets, can you find a way to silence the concerns, right? Vegas, we see later this year, just a couple of weeks now. Utah, I think, is another tough opponent. We'll have the Stars on the road. In just a couple of days, we'll also see the Oilers, who, they've been tail spinning a little bit recently, but still have the matchup advantage in terms of their top 6 talent versus Winnipeg. Sometimes, though, the Jets can still pull out big victories when they do it by committee. And I'm hoping that on top of the top line, starting to put 2 and 2 together at 5v5, the rest of the team can kind of fill in the gaps. I think the next few weeks are going to be fascinating to see how the Jets really build their playoff case. They're certainly in really good position to win the West and to win the President's Trophy. But, whether they actually will pull this off and whether they can go on a deep run, I think it'll really come down to their top players showing up. I have a lot more confidence this year in Connor Hellebuck. I do think that this feels like the year that he's going to go on a deep run. His performance really hasn't wavered at all this year. And, he came swinging out of the gates, right? It wasn't even a slow start like he's had in most of his seasons. He just immediately started shutting down opponents from game one. So if he can keep doing that for, 16 more wins in the postseason, that is the absolute dream. But Winnipeg has a really tough schedule ahead, so I'm fascinated to see what this team does. I think the game against the Caps, the Oilers, who else? Probably Vegas, Dallas. These are some really interesting tests for Winnipeg, really good opportunities for the top line to show that they're really serious about matching them against these opponents and that they can put them away. Most of the other players on this team, you sort of know what you're getting with. But the top line, I think, has the most room for growth and improvement, relatively speaking, just because, last year's performance and their bad games this year leave a lot to be desired. But, the Stars game just now, that is what I think they can do and what I'm really hoping that they do once we get into the latter portion of this postseason run. So, very excited in some ways, still a little bit nervous if we see a Vegas or a Colorado in the playoffs. But I think the nice thing for the Jets this year is it seems like they found ways to sort of compensate even when at times things aren't clicking with the top 6. We all know that the second line hasn't always been great. The second line, I thought, in the Stars game tonight was really quiet, really couldn't do much. But everyone else really stepped up, and that's kind of been Winnipeg's mentality this year. Next man up. In this case, the top line, I think, really led the way, and that's probably how it should be, right? The top line should be your pace setter, the one who's leading by example, and they did that 100%. So really no complaints there. Very happy to see for the Jets. This is a tremendous victory. It puts them really in further control of their own destiny, and that really is the best outcome. Last year was really rough for the Jets, even though they did kind of win out with a big win streak. We all kind of felt like it was a bit fraudulent. There was a lot of concern that what would happen in the playoffs was that they would eventually get exposed. I wouldn't say that I fully feel like that's not a possibility this postseason, but I think I just expect the Jets to have a better run. Even if they lose, even if they get knocked out, I still think that this team is going to put on a much stronger performance than they did last year. Last year, they really weren't competitive. This year, I think even if they do lose, even if they get knocked out, they will still put on as strong of a response as you can have. And so I'm just really hoping that Winnipeg's top players show up, show out, and have the kind of performance that, quite frankly, the team deserves and the fan base deserves. I do expect Canada Life Center to be absolutely rocking. I think it's going to be a great, great whiteout season. I'm already thinking about getting my passport renewed so I can come up at some point. I really hope Winnipeg goes deep enough so I can come later in the playoffs. Would be wonderful to get up there, watch some Jets hockey, and hopefully hang out with friends that I haven't seen in a while and spend time with all of you if y'all happen to be around. So if I get up there, maybe we'll do a watch party for any of the games that I'm not able to go to. We'll have to see what we can do. If you've got some good recommendations for spots where people do watch parties, let me know, and maybe we will start to organize something as we get closer to the playoffs. But Obviously, the Jets still have a lot of games left. I mean, we are, 15, 15, 16 games left. It is getting to the real end of the season, and I'm still very excited for the playoffs, but there's a lot of work left to be done, and the Jets still can improve even further with some of these tune-ups against top teams. Let's chat about how their next couple of games are going to shape up in just a brief second. Before we go there, though, did want to let you know about our friends and partners at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where the heck did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And look, we all know with inflation and stuff, prices have gone way up. So, money's going out faster than it's coming in. That's where Monarch Money helps. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you just stop managing your money and start building wealth. It's a great opportunity to really balance the books, and you can also do it with a collaborative approach. If you've got a partner or somebody in your life who also shares your finances, you can manage money with your partner by using track shared and personal accounts. You can essentially go through goal setting. You can always stay on the same page without any of the stress. It's all in one platform, very easy to use app, and you can filter out different things like, your food expenditures, subscriptions, all that. It's helping you set goals and budget smarter. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are just wrapping up with some final thoughts from the upcoming slate of games that the Jets have. We're about to get a real tour of the Pacific. Very funny how this schedule has kind of been set up. So the Jets have 3 games against the Pacific, then 3 games against the Metro and Atlantic, and then another 3 games against the rest of the Pacific. Very weird how that happened. I guess it might just be a scheduling thing, since a lot of these games are going to be on the road. But on Sunday, obviously, the Jets are going to be facing the Kraken. Seattle is not making the playoffs this year. They have really fallen off, and I think for Winnipeg, this is a game that, even though it's on the later side, the Jets probably have a nice shot at winning. I think Winnipeg expects to come away with a victory. I think that they would be very disappointed if they don't get 2 points. Obviously, this game against the Stars was much bigger, but that doesn't mean that the Jets are wanting to overlook a team like this. Seattle is desperate to make an impression for next season, and I think with a lot of uncertainty about their place in this division and some of the new coaching additions and stuff, they need to figure something out about what to do with their pool of aging talent, plus some of the young kids. McCann didn't get moved. Alexiak's still there. I don't really know what their vision is or what their plan is, but this is a game that I think they want to come into and make a statement against the top team in the league, right? So going to be a tough one, but I think the Jets have a really good shot at winning. The game against Vancouver could actually be a playoff preview. It's going to be on Tuesday. It's, again, another late night one, 9 p.m. Central, 10 p.m. my time. I'll at least have the advantage of being able to watch it at a normal time at 7, because I'll be on the West Coast for once. Thank you, for work conferencing finally paying off for me for once. But I think for Winnipeg, this game has some interesting implications, right? If you do really well against Vancouver, it's going to make you feel good about that opening round, right? The wild card for the Jets really shouldn't be too much of a problem. You either get Calgary or Vancouver, and if it's Vancouver, you are feeling pretty decent about it. I think the Jets very clearly have a matchup advantage. The Canucks this year are just not the same team as they were last year. Kind of what happens when you stop shooting 40%, but even then, they've had some really big injuries. They've had some roster upheaval, and Pettersson, not really having the greatest of seasons, I think, has been a tough thing, right? They've had a lot of locker room distractions. I will say Elias has started to look more like Elias recently, so I think he might finally be turning the corner. But still, for the Jets, it is a tough game. It's going to be on the road, and perhaps a playoff preview for that opening round. So show up, show out, and have a strong performance. Finally, the Jets face off against the Oilers, and Edmonton has really just gone all over the place. I don't know what's wrong with Edmonton. I don't know if it's just an accumulation of strange roster choices or just mediocre play. I really couldn't tell you. I haven't been watching them that closely recently, but they have had a really dire run. They have really not won many games of late. They have slipped further back in the Pacific Division race. They are still within touching distance of first, but it's a 5-point gap, and they've played one more game than the Knights. So functionally right now, I don't think that they really have a way to close that distance. And given the fact that their goaltending and blue line haven't really been able to stem the tide, I really do think I really do think that they are more vulnerable than they were last year. I know that their off-season departures didn't really help this team either, and they made some big bets on players like Arvidsson that really haven't panned out. So for the Jets, I think this is a good opportunity to see how the Scheifele line does against a McDavid line. I know that McDavid himself maybe hasn't been as dominant this season, but he's still really freaking good. And even with the sputtering team kind of spiraling out of top playoff contention status, they are still a really tough opponent. I don't think it'll be an easy out, and the Jets really want to show a good performance here against a really talented top six ahead of your playoff run. You do that, and you'll start to feel really good about whatever happens if you face a Vegas or a Colorado. I think the Oilers, their top lines are probably the closest match you have to anything that you'll see in the second round and beyond for the Jets playoff run. So you show up here, you have a really good game, you find ways to limit McDavid's damage, you really feel good about what's to come in the following week. So a big opportunity here. I do think the Jets will lose at least one of these games just because, you're going to drop results here and there. I think they'll go 2-1 in the stretch. Maybe even like 2-0-1. Maybe they have an overtime loss. But I still think the Jets have a really good opportunity to continue to cement their place at the top of the league and at the top of the Central and also the West by extension. So what a time to be alive, man. Winnipeg just really rolling in the joy. Everyone's having good times. The vibes are high. And, I think we are all looking forward to what comes out of this once we finally reach the playoffs. But let me know your predictions for the upcoming stretch here. Do you think the Jets are going to really stamp their hold on the West, or do you think that maybe over the next couple of games they have a couple of dropped results? Let me know your predictions below in the comments or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. I thank you so much for listening and making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. Next week, we'll have a recap of Winnipeg versus Seattle. Obviously, some preview coverage ahead of their other Pacific Division games, and of course, recaps of those as well. So see you then. Have a great night. And as always, go Jets, go.